started, thank you, Jacob, for that introduction. I want to give a shout out to Michelle. Thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to be here sharing some information about children, youth, and families, and really strategies to support families better. And so again, as Jacob mentioned, my name is Sheamekah Williams. I'm the president and CEO of the Evolution Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization based in the state of Oklahoma. So extremely excited to be here. As a part of this presentation, I really want to share the learning objectives, really understanding the unique needs of children, youth, and families in 2025, identifying, design, and implement approaches for states, communities that they can establish that are really unique to children, youth, and families. I also want to talk about needs for children, youth, and families and young adults with behavioral health challenges, and also explore community strategies and examples to support families, which is, again, this is a topic that is extremely dear to me. As Jacob mentioned, I served 15 years as the Director of Children, Youth, and Family Services for the State Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services here in the state of Oklahoma. I was also the interim Executive Director for Community Mental Health Center for 2 years of that 15 years before departing from the Department of Mental Health about a year ago to become the president of the Evolution Foundation. And so again, as my experience working with children, youth, and families across our state, I have a extreme background and knowledge in, working with kids that have traumatic trauma history, kids that have substance use disorder, and kids that are considered to be SED, severely emotionally disturbed. And so I want to kind of provide you guys with some facts, and I think these facts are really important, but there's something specific to this that I want to highlight. Nearly 20% of children, youth, and families ages 3 to 17 in the United States has a mental, emotional, developmental, or behavioral disorder. And suicidal behaviors among high school students have increased more than 40% since 2019. Mental health challenges were the leading cause of death and disability in these age groups. I mean, think about that. We're saying 20% of children. That means that 1 in 5 kids that we come in contact with will have some type of mental health disorder. In addition to that, these trends were extremely heightened during COVID-19. Okay, I definitely hate to bring up COVID-19 because all of us remember what took place during COVID. The nation was on alert. The separation for kids from schools, as well as separation from some family members. Again, that was definitely a traumatic experience. But again, since COVID, we've seen numbers that have continued to increase. It is also important to mention the fact that when we think about these facts, the fact that high school students increase more than 40% over the decade when it comes to suicide and behavioral health challenges. And so that's pretty significant. The think that our young people have suicidal thoughts is really alarming. It is also important to understand the suicide death increased by 2% for Hispanic youth. Again, when we're talking about populations of diversity, those death rates definitely increase among Hispanic families. And then also the rates for non-Hispanic families, we're talking about white youth, has decreased by 13%, which again, that's pretty significant. But for whatever reason, our Hispanic youth are really challenged with suicidal thoughts. And so some of these stats, again, you guys can read these stats, but these stats are extremely alarming from my standpoint, because what I know is across the nation, we have a mental health epidemic. We have an epidemic. So what I want to talk about is really, to me, the national essentials to really how do you develop a framework to better support children and families. In this framework, there's something specific that I'm going to talk about, and that is the collaboration efforts and partnerships that can happen as a part of developing a system for children and families. And specifically, these partnerships will happen at the actual local level. Did I stop sharing? No.
No, you're good.
Okay, so my screen. Okay. And so really looking at really developing partnerships or developing a framework for children and families, it is really important to collaborate and partner across all child serving agencies, communities, in order to support families, children, youth, and young adults. And I think those partnerships has to exist with the involvement of families and young people. Workforce development is an important factor. I think that when we're talking about supporting children, youth, and families, we have to develop the workforce to be mindful that families really matter, really looking at family involvement, really allowing families to create their own unique plan of care when we're talking about specific services. And we also have to understand the culture of those families and really how to support those families in the way so they can be successful. It is really important to make sure that families are connected to their communities. Communities provide a lot of resources and supports for families, so making those family connections. In addition to that, providing avenues for training and technical assistance, not just among families, but also among our workforce. Providing trainings to local coalitions, providing trainings to business leaders, providing trainings to our legislators, helping our legislators to really understand what families need is extremely important. And then also making sure we develop the array of resources and supports that families need. One of the examples is respite care. Respite care is a unique care factor that allows families to take an actual break when in fact that they need it, or when in fact there is a family disruption where the family needs some separation time. So that's very important. In addition to that, making sure families have the availability to access the types of resources that they need to access. So in many states, you will see transportation authorities really picking up services for Medicaid families so that they can have transportation to and from their appointments, and other services that are extremely important. Also, really thinking about a process for evaluation and continuous quality improvement is really important. Again, it is important not to just develop a set of services or develop a set of supports without having a framework that, again, creates an opportunity to do checks and balances. Is this working? What is the feedback from the families? And how do we know that these things is working? So evaluation is extremely important. Let's see. For what? Oh, there we go. Okay, Jake, for some reason, it's not allowing me to advance my slides. Okay.
I was gonna say I might have been having the same issue earlier when I was trying to click next.
Okay, let me try this. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and then I'm going to start sharing again because
Yeah, go for it.
let's start there. Perfect. And then again, really thinking about the population. I think that when we think about the families that we serve or the families that we support across the state of Kansas, we're talking about infants and toddlers. We're talking about a combination of school-age kids, transition-age youth. We have families that have intellectual or developmental disabilities. We're talking about families that are in state custody. And oftentimes we have families who have co-occurring disorders such as behavioral health and substance abuse, or substance abuse as a primary. We're also looking at women with SUD and pregnant. I mean, again, women sometimes have substance use issues and oftentimes are pregnant as a part of the population that we're really looking at. So really the cohesive, we're talking about family as a whole, from kids that were in utero all the way up to the age of 25 is extremely important when I say families and you. The types of partnerships that are extremely important, state and local level leadership, all child serving agencies, as well as external evaluators, universities and colleges, foundation, public policy groups. And the most important is really creating and generating an opportunity to include youth and family organizations. Again, I referenced the CBHN, the Children's Behavioral Health Network, as one example. And I'm going to use that example throughout our presentation because that's an example that we have here in Oklahoma. And I want to share some things about that example. It is also important to really be clear and create a vision and a plan. As you're talking about building state leadership, building state and local partnership, what does those partnerships need to look like? What does leadership development need to what type of leadership development needs to happen for family members? We like to have family members that actually sit at the table among our professionals and leaders who are developing the services and the practices for families. The reason why that's really important is because there are many families that have been involved in multiple different systems. And so really providing an opportunity where they can share in the development and the design of a child service system is extremely important. Oftentimes, families will need some type of training and coaching. That's really important. Again, I mean, we all know that coaching is probably one of the best models, very similar to what takes place in our sports world. Coaches have the ability to motivate and influence. So creating opportunities for families to be trained in coaches is extremely important. And really explaining what advocacy looks like. What advocacy and the different levels of advocacy. Again, when we're talking about advocacy, we can talk about advocacy in the reference to policy and legislative developments, or we can talk about advocacy at the local level. Maybe you're advocating for a family, or you're advocating for yourself in a school IEP meeting. And then also, what types of supports are really going to be appropriate as a part of helping family members to really learn how to take on those leadership roles and responsibilities. And then oftentimes thinking about, some of our families have certain disabilities that they need that extended support. And so really thinking about what are those supporting factors. It's really important to think about the fact that when we have family members to sit at the table, we often want to think about how can we incentivize them or provide stipends to increase their opportunity to join us. Most of us sit at many tables because we're professionals and we're really developing practices for families. And so when you think about bringing families to the table and those training opportunities and that development opportunity, how do we provide opportunities where we can incentivize families to sit at the same space and place that we sit because we're getting paid for it? And so why not look at ways to incentivize? And then also look for ways to enhance family empowerment. Oftentimes, again, really looking at some of the systemic issues that really move families back, where they're not willing to come to the table. How do we begin to address those things? How do we begin to address the cultural norms that often happen in professional environments to make sure that we're inclusive of families? And then also, how do we help them to utilize their voice, to tell their stories, to share that information, because it is extremely important. Develop formal peer-to-peer support programs. I think that is really important because, as I'm going to share with you later on in the slide, the significance of peer-to-peer interaction in our everyday life and how important that is. And oftentimes when we're going through what we call life, having someone that you can connect with to be able to share their experiences is extremely important. But not only that, just having someone that is there for you, that touch, that connection, that ability to say, hey, I'm just having a really bad day and I can definitely use a kind word is really important. But then also helping families to navigate through systematic things that often take place, the systematic challenges that families face, whether we're involved with the juvenile justice system, whether we're involved with the child welfare, mental health, the court system, the various systems, whether we're applying for disability and we're on a waiting list, the various systems that oftentimes create challenges and that sometimes families face is extremely important. And then workforce training on best practices for families. I think that oftentimes when we talk about training families, we want families to be trained and to be a certain way in order to exist with us. But it's also important to train our workforce, to train our skill staff, our professional staffs on best practices and how to interface with families. So that's extremely important as well. I mentioned the Children's Behavioral Health Network, and this is a network that's based out of the state of Oklahoma. The reason why this network is extremely important is because we believe that family organizations are extremely important in navigating the service systems and really helping families to navigate life. And I say that because oftentimes I want to go back to who we are as individuals. As individuals, oftentimes, what do we do when we're in a situation of need? We rely on faith, family, and friends. But sometimes when you have the different challenges in life, whether you have a kid who has a mental health disorder or whether you have a kid that has substance abuse challenges thereof, sometimes you can be cut off from other opportunities to socialize. I've known families in the state of Oklahoma and other states that have been asked to leave their churches. They've been asked to leave certain civic groups and certain involvement. And sometimes they get disconnected from family and friends because of the behaviors or the problematic issues that sometimes kids have. And so I don't know about you guys, but I can remember a time when, I am a therapeutic foster mom, and I can remember a time when I was interfacing with our public school system because of the behaviors of one of my kids. And again, oftentimes you're looked at as to, if this kid is a problem, then again, they come directly from you. The school didn't know that this particular kid was my foster daughter, but they looked at me in the same way and really stereotyped me based on the behaviors of my child. So again, families often face difficulty. And so creating a behavioral health network, or not just a behavioral health network, or a family organization network, is really important. And let me tell you why. The Children's Behavioral Health Network out of the state of Oklahoma has 6 different family organizations that are a part of this particular network. The reason why this is important is because all of these organizations provide a different set of experiences for families. But collectively together, we have the ability to navigate all families in the state of Oklahoma through services and provide support as they're navigating those services. So regardless if you are a foundation that provides technical assistance and training to the workforce or to a community, or if you're like NAMI, where you provide NAMI trainings and family advocacy trainings for youth and young adults as well as adults, or where you're a statewide family network where you're providing peer-to-peer support to families who have kids who have a disability, as well as kids who have NICU challenges. I mean, again, collectively together, we're strong, because families can come to our network and they can gain access to any type of service or support that any of our organizations provide. And they can be provided with a continuum of them. I mean, there may be certain things that we as an organization with the Evolution Foundation provide that the other organizations don't. But collectively together, families have access to all the availability of resources in order to support them. And so I think it's really important for networks to really come together for the purpose of really standing in those gaps and supporting families to navigate the various systems challenges that they face. And sometimes it's facing things such as COVID-19. When families in our country were in a position where they were paralyzed and didn't want to make inappropriate moves because they were concerned about getting COVID. Again, these types of partnerships really help to navigate families through stressful moments or stressful times. Also, this is a reference. Again, you can utilize this as a reference to get information on how. It doesn't necessarily matter if you're an individual and you're wanting to create an opportunity for families, if you're a group, if you're a state entity, or if you are a state government agency. I think that, again, as a nation, we really need to be thinking about how do we truly put opportunities in front of families that are for families and by families. The reason why that's important, because I think all of us work in a service system, a service delivery system, where it is our profession to provide these services. Well, this is a little different. These are a lot of volunteers. These are a lot of families who have lived experiences, sharing their experiences in order to help. And it's more of a natural process. It's more of a natural partnership that we create for families. It's not like anything that would be stigmatizing or anything that would be a little concerning in the sense for families. We're not trying to require families to do anything. We only want to educate, we only want to develop, and we only want to support families. And so again, considerations for peer family support opportunities. These organizations have various levels of training and opportunities that they can share for individuals, groups, or organizations that really want to work with families. This is really extremely touching for me because I'm going to share one state example. And in sharing this example, I'm going to share my example. And Michelle, I hope that, again, you can, you can connect with some of the things that I'm going to share. And that actually, this is very heartfelt for me. As I mentioned to you guys, COVID-19 was a time when the nation was put on alert. And as the nation was put on alert, there were many things that took place for many people. And oftentimes, as professionals, we think about providing services and supports to our constituents, our consumers, the families that we serve. And oftentimes, we don't think about what that looks like for us. Well, COVID-19 was definitely an eye-opener for me. The reason why it was an eye-opener, because at the height of my profession, as the executive director of a community mental health center, as the director of Children, Youth, and Family Services for the state of Oklahoma. I was a professor at the university, adjunct professor at the University of Oklahoma, and I had received multiple accolades. In addition to that, I was also working with national organizations as a subject matter expert, really helping states and communities to develop the continuum of care for children, youth, and families. And so really at the height of my profession, COVID-19 hit. During COVID-19, I suffered. And when I say I suffered, I suffered. And what I mean by that is COVID-19, quickly, right prior to COVID-19, I had suffered the loss of my dad and my grandfather. During COVID-19, I was with probably in the midst of COVID-19, probably maybe 6 months into COVID-19, right after 2019, going into 2020, I received a phone call that my biological sister and my stepbrother had passed away. My stepbrother and sister had passed away 2 days apart. The reason why this is significant, because I think that oftentimes we forget the challenges that families face on a regular basis. In addition to that, living in rural Oklahoma, I was a person of faith, friends, families, of course, you see my pets on here. These things were extremely dear to me. But in the matter of a few months in the COVID, I had technically lost all of my family except my biological mom. And so today I'm going through only child syndrome, but during that time, the devastation of the loss, the expectation for me to continue to move forward, the expectation for me to be this executive director as well as interim director and teacher and friend and all of the things, COVID-19 literally put a lot of stress on me, a lot of stress and trauma. When I think about COVID-19, it really took me back to, I actually had an opportunity to sit in on a family support group. The expectation was just to kind of go in, shadow to see how families were doing, go in for a couple of minutes and come out. When I went into that family support group, that family support network group was extremely beneficial to me because for the first time, I was able to connect to people's experiences who had experiences like myself. At that particular time, I was no longer the director. I was no longer the executive director. I was no longer the top-notch professional of a state agency who had received all accolades. I was a family member. During this time, I was fostering, as you see, I was fostering 2 kids in my home. And I had to continue. I had to figure out, because they were home, how was I going to work day to day, but also how was I going to help them with subjects like math and science that I'm not good with. And it took this group of family members to help me to navigate that. They gave me 1-800 numbers to help homework help hotlines. They told me the available resources that were out there that I had no idea about that supported families, not only supported families with the types of resources that families needed, such as food, clothing, payment for bills, and certain infrastructure things. They talked to me about the services that were needed for me. And that was the assistance with homework help and to really think about how I was dealing with the grief and the loss that I was going through. And so this network became a foundation for me in many, many ways. After those network meetings, I had an opportunity to meet with several different mothers who had kids that were who had behavioral health challenges. And I was able to ask questions around how these mothers were able to navigate the challenges of COVID. And the one thing that stood out to me had a lot to do with the support networks that they had built up around them and they had learned to build by connecting with some of the family organizations. They talked about the naturalness that felt, how normal that felt to connect with people like them in places and spaces that understood them. And so I say that because I think it's really important for us to really think about who we are in our day to day. Think about the same challenges that we face. Oftentimes, there are families, depending on the social economic, depending on what places and spaces they live, that are facing similar challenges. And I think that is a grounding place for us. But what it done for me is it created an opportunity for me. And I'm going to talk about that opportunity because shortly after COVID, I was recruited by just about every organization across the nation that really had an opportunity to develop services for children and families. But the one that I chose was the foundation, an organization called the Evolution Foundation. And I'm going to tell you why. The Evolution Foundation was an organization that was based out of the state of Oklahoma. And the ultimate goal of the Evolution Foundation, I'm going to go back a slide. The goal of the Evolution Foundation was to provide hope for Oklahoma's children, youth, and families, one community at a time. That resonated with me because I knew then, at one point in time, at that very time during COVID, I needed that same hope. And if I can then turn around and run an organization and lift up an organization that could do a much better job and really do that for multiple families and communities in our state, then I felt like that I would be doing a great job. So after 15 years of service, I moved to the Evolution Foundation. One of the things that's really important, as I talked about, individuals, organizations, and groups. And I say this to you, Michelle, because if you are, whether you're a single mom, a mom within a family, whether you work for an organization or you're independently on our own, you too can make a difference in your community. And so what we do at the Evolution Foundation, we work with local coalitions across the state of Oklahoma. If there's not a local coalition in any of our counties, we go there and we build one. We build these coalitions for the primary purpose of really helping communities to address systematic issues that impact children, youth, and families. So right now, you'll see our state map. We have 77 counties in the state of Oklahoma. And of those 77 counties, we're in 68 of those counties where we've actually built or we are working with an existing coalition to really do things that matter for children, youth, and families. One of the things that we also do is our community survey. We do a survey, and when I say we do a survey, and I say it doesn't matter if you're a group or individual working to develop a community coalition, to really have information from the community in a small survey. This can be a handwritten survey, electronic survey. I mean, there's all types of ways to develop surveys, but there are a couple of things that we wanted to know. We wanted to know, does the team work together to reduce stigma around mental health and substance use in the community? We wanted to know, does the team work to achieve shared community-wide outcomes? We also wanted to know does the community understand their purpose, role, and responsibility? And of course, we have multiple other questions that we have. So our whole intent was to bring together diverse members of the community that served in different fashions, whether they're child serving agency, business community, faith-based organization, tribes, any type of community partner. The ultimate goal for this and the ultimate the nucleus of this, these were people who cared about children and families. These were grandparents, these were parents, these were aunts and uncles, these were friends. I mean, all of us have a connection to kids. And so really that was our connection to bringing these coalitions together. Do you care about kids, and do kids and families matter? And I think we always say, whether we're professionals or whether we are individuals that are working or single moms, or whether we are stay-at-home moms, or whether we are business owners, We all care about kids. And so that was the really bottom line. We have community consultants in each of our communities who really work with our coalitions around advocacy and building resource networks. They really work on communication and collaboration, making sure people are talking and connecting. And I don't know where you guys are from, the state of Kansas, which Kansas is very similar to the state of Oklahoma. Now, on Friday night, what's going to happen Friday night, high school football? Everybody in town is going to be at that football stadium. Everybody in town. And if something happens with the star player, everybody in town is rallying around that player to make sure that he has the essentials or the things that he needs to be successful. That's what a community is. And I believe in this old proverb, it takes a village, and it does take a village to raise a child. And so again, bringing communities together around a common theme can be extremely important. And it is the way to really successfully helping children, youth, and families in any state and in any community or any county. I truly believe that. In addition to our community consultants, it was extremely important for me as the new president of the Evolution Foundation to really lift up opportunities for families through those peer-to-peer engagements or peer-to-peer navigation. And again, the term, hey, navigators, peer-to-peer supports, however you want to use it. But what was really important to me to really hire women who have lived experience, whether they've been involved in the child welfare system, whether they have their own substance abuse challenges, or however. And that's what I chose to do. I wanted moms who had their own challenges. I wanted women who had been involved with the child welfare system. They were raising kids. They had some type of connection or interactions with the courts. And I wanted them to have to be able to have sobriety with a 2+ years of sobriety. And most of our navigators have around 3+, and probably now they have way more than that. But at the time of onboarding, it was 2+. The reason why that's significant for me and significant for a lot of family organizations was because what better person to share their experiences and to help other people than someone who's been there and done that. And the reason why I think that's important is because remember my COVID story? There were people who were going through that process, those family groups who really helped me through that, helped me through the grief and the loss of family members, helped me to understand, even though as a professional, there were still things in life that would often come and we would have to face those things. And sometimes those things can be extremely traumatic. So to walk me through that trauma, to help guide me, to share the resources that they knew about during that time when, this person who was highly educated didn't know how to do math problems that were middle school math problems or high school math problems. I think we all can relate to what took place during COVID. But again, the whole emphasis, it was important for me in the organization that I was run, is to bring on a new level of support. And I wanted people that could be out in the community, out in the streets, if you would call it, to do that street outreach, to do those connections with people who really needed to be connected with in the places and spaces that they reside. It didn't matter. I needed those troopers to be rallying for children and families here in our state of Oklahoma. And so really bringing on those navigators was a really important part. I know that there are a lot of family organizations that have volunteers to do this type of work. They have trained volunteers as well as other peer types of partners that really help to support families. And so again, this is not unique to any family organization. The role of the navigators, it was really around engaging in resource utilization. This is where the peer navigators assist families with identify those natural supports within their community and to navigate the system of accessing those essential services. So again, identifying those natural supports. Those natural supports could have been neighbors, friends, connections that they had in the community. But then in addition to that, what are those essential services that you need to have and that you need to have access to, and where are they located, and how do I connect with those essential services? So again, regardless if you're a family member and you're struggling with substance abuse, or your child is struggling with substance abuse or mental health, again, having someone that can engage those resources are really important. Managing life stressors, that one was an important role for me when I put that into place. I think that oftentimes life just brings on its own set of stressors, and really helping people to think about that preparedness that needs to take place. If this happened, then what? What about this? What is your plan? You know, again, how do you make sure that you can manage your finances to make it through the month in order for you to be able to put groceries on the table? What does that look like for you? How do you make sure that you have the gas money put aside to make sure the transportation is going to get you back and forth to the different appointments? What if car trouble happens? Then what will you do? How will you get? And so really creating an opportunity to talk about life in real life in a way to help people to think about, if this, then what? And we thought that was extremely important because, as like I mentioned, as COVID hit, a lot of people didn't have a plan. A lot of people, we didn't know what to do and how we were going to do it. The other thing that was really important is access and local support. I think that in the norm, the day-to-day for myself and you, I mean, we think about opportunities such as joining the YMCA, joining other organizations. We kind of know what local businesses offers. We know what some of the resources are that we connect with. But in many cases, some families don't necessarily know the availability of the resources and how to pull in natural resources, such as, joining a community coalition or a faith-based organization for the purpose of being active and socializing in your community. What are some of the things that you enjoy, and how do we help you to connect to those things? In addition to that, our family navigators really work as a part of this to develop what we call our family care plans. Family care plans is that mom's plan for her family. And that's kind of what we talk about. If this happened, then what will you do? How do you build your safety net? How do you make sure you're able to maintain and keep your kids safe? If you don't get off of work until 7 o'clock in the evening, who supervises and supports your kids from the time that they get out of school to the time that you come home? What does that look like? If you're involved with the court system, how do you track your treatment progress in order to make sure that you're able to provide that information to the courts when you have to go? If your kids are involved in the child welfare system, how do you make sure that you're following your child welfare plan in order to, again, help your kids to successfully reunite? And if your child has a developmental disability, how do you make sure that you build a plan that not only supports your kids, but also supports you? Because oftentimes, I mean, whether we're talking about a mental health disability, intellectual or developmental, there are often times when those stressors can have a lot of stress factors on the family. What does that plan look like? How do you incorporate times, me times? I call them me times. Some people call them respite. Some people call it go to grandma's for the weekend. But some people say, oh, when the behaviors are up, he has an opportunity to go with his dad. Well, that's great. But sometimes I just want me time for no other reason other than to replenish myself. And there doesn't necessarily have to be a crisis going on in my family or a crisis with my kid in order to have that me time. And so building those factors in is really important. And then also making sure that we have an actual plan that says, in a crisis or in a safety situation, this is what will happen. And this is how I will get the support that I need. What are the tasks and the steps that we need to have? This one specifically talks about reunifying with their kid. What does that say? How are we going to make sure that our kids are able to maintain safe, not only when they're in our care, but when they're in the care of others? If in fact, I am a woman who has substance abuse challenges and I may relapse, what happens with my kids? How do I make sure they remain safe? And so those are things that are important. And then also, I think it's also important how I did it and how you can do it is really important. To be able to share our stories as peers, for our navigators to say, you know what, it was hard, but I was able to do it, and this is how I did it. And again, the road trip that you take may be a little different, but let me share from my experience and what was really helpful for me. So that's really important. Again, also, I kind of talked about system navigation of social services, education, behavioral health, child welfare, and however. Again, that's the entire part, really helping families to navigate through the system as well as services and supports that are going to be helpful for them. What we tell our partners, when the Evolution Foundation was founded, I mean, again, we're talking about one guy who had a dream. We're talking about a husband and wife who said, we just want to do good by families and whatever that takes. And the interesting thing that he was one individual that went out and supported communities by himself. And over time, he had built up to more community consultants. And then at some point in time, as I came to take over the Evolution Foundation, we've been able to expand roles and navigators. So I say this because whether you're an individual and you want to make a difference in the lives of children, youth, and families, or if you're an organization, you have the ability to do that. And one of the ways to do that, and in my experience, the best way to do that is creating and working in a community fashion with community coalitions or an organized community group that has the ability to talk and strategize around opportunities to families. You have no idea what happens when you begin to bring different pieces of the pie together. It formulates a complete pie. So if you're able to bring business owners in and you're able to blend some funding with different entities, and you're able to have resource fairs to educate families, and you're able to look at how do you partner with the school system in order to put after school programs in for, single moms who maybe work late hours, or you're able to partner with other entities that have an opportunity to create certain services and supports for families. Again, the collective thing is bringing people together for the benefit of the family is always a value. And so I tell people that all the time, that is the essential, most promising thing that you can do in any child serving system in order to support children and families. And so in addition that, we tell our partners, again, we're here, we show up. You can call us if you're a family member that's having difficulties. You can call us if you need navigation support. You can call us if you need whatever types of support you need. We tell people to call us, and basically we try to help them figure it out. This is some information on our website. The reason why I put this in here is because my hope is that there is at least one family member in here today that has a lived experience, and from his or her lived experience really wants to work to make lives better for other families, where they connect with a family organization in the state of Kansas, or whether they connect with a community coalition in order to begin to build a partnership that's about families. And again, there are some ideas and resources on our website